Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of Vitality OET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that so many things change in this time in your life. You start having brain fog, irritability, mood swings, hot flashes, night sweats, and of course, waking around the middle that seems to have come out of absolutely nowhere despite you not changing anything. But we know that your body is inherently different now, so your tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio just isn't working anymore. So our mission here at Vitality is to teach you about how your body has changed so you can now take care of it, so that you can really understand how to reach those health and fitness goals now that you've experienced these changes and live a life full of vitality. Today, I have a very special guest on, Mr. Jason Phillips. He is the CEO and founder of the Nutrition Coaching Institute. He has a nutrition coaching certification and certifies thousands of coaches every single year. He is who I did my nutrition certification through, so you can thank him for me being able to help you. He also does business coaching, and I am so blessed to have had him as a mentor for the last year and a half. Jason has coached and trained so many coaches and so many individuals to help them reach their health and fitness goals. So I am very excited to have this expert and someone that I call my friend on the podcast. Okay, so first of all, Jason, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's so great to have you here.
It's an honor. I appreciate it. It's, I always love the opportunity to get to speak, but, I've literally gotten to watch everything that you've built, like all the people you've helped. And so it's really cool to be here.
Yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know Jason, he's actually been my mentor for like the last year and a half-ish. I first learned about him through taking some nutrition certifications, learned so much there. And then I got better at coaching and business took off like crazy and I needed help. So then I got quite close with Jason and we've worked together for the last, year and a half. So he is partly to give a lot of credit to the success of Vitality, which is awesome. So today I really want to have Jason on because coaching is his wheelhouse, nutrition is his wheelhouse. This is his jam. This is what he's known for. And I wanted to ask first, why coaching? Why didn't you get more into dietetics or maybe going into med school or things like that? What drove you to want to do nutrition coaching over the more classic Western medicine type stuff?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So for those people that don't know my background, I was an anorexic. When I was 18 or 19, I had an eating disorder and nearly ended my own life because of it. And it was a coach that helped me overcome that. And so I always knew there was some level of connection that humans that were looking for change needed to facilitate the change. And it took me a long time. I'd been in the space for quite some time, but really it was a big light bulb moment for me. Probably 10 years later when I realized I was the king of searching for knowledge. I think my parents may have questioned a lot of things about my life because I had every bodybuilding magazine known to man in my room and every nutrition book. And so it's I'm looking at pictures of dudes posing on a stage and I'm reading nothing but things about food. And I'm pretty sure my parents, they had lots of questions, right? But they, I knew so much around how food was being used, yet I didn't make any change. I never ate more. I never stopped exercising as much. I just kept driving myself into this rabbit hole. And, 10 years later, I look back on it and I'm wow, I had the knowledge. I may not have had the textbook knowledge, but I had the anecdotal knowledge. I had the empirical data that says here's what works in the space. And yet until another human being came in my life and was willing to walk that journey with me, nothing ever changed. And so, I quickly recognized I was not the greatest student. When I was in college, I didn't like going to class. I didn't like doing homework. I was reasonably intelligent. In high school, I always had really good test scores, but I had zeros on homework. So I always my quote was always well, tests show how smart you are. Homework shows how hard you work. And I'm not a hard worker, but So I was always smart enough. I didn't want to do the extra work. So like dietetics and all those things, like it just never appealed to me. But like I knew I wanted to change, and I had firsthand evidence that a coach single-handedly could change. And I think that, present day 2023, we only continue to see that more and more, right? I think that there's no shortage of knowledge. I would argue what we know about humans and the human body and physiology and metabolism is at an all-time high. Yet look around the world, we still have an obesity epidemic. We still have people getting sicker. We still have, I guess I would almost call it confusion around what the protocols are. So, it's, I guess, diving into the side of creating more problems wasn't appealing, and being somebody on the front lines that was a problem solver, just, it lit me up, and it's what I became pretty good at.
So when you said like a coach really like saved your life and like walked you through it and stuff, had you tried like going, like had your family try and push you to go see a dietitian or a doctor or things like that prior? And like,
ironically, I saw a dietitian. So my parents were pretty concerned, right? So like to set the stage, before I became anorexic, I was one of the top 50 like golfers, like amateur golfers in the world. And so like my parents were convinced, or my dad was convinced anyway, like he's just going to play golf the rest of his life. And so, like then my mom, she's like the most supportive person. I always said like my mom was like my greatest supporter and greatest enabler. And so like, she would try to support me on this fitness thing, but then like she could tell like it wasn't healthy, and there was like this big like back and forth. But like the big telltale sign is we took a family vacation to the beach right after my senior year in high school, and logically you go to the beach, you eat a bunch of junk, you gain some weight. Like I was probably the only like high school kid in history to lose 3 or 4 pounds while you're at the beach. And so like I would like go for these like 3-mile runs every day, and then my parents would like want to walk a mile to like the ice cream shop, and so I'd be like, yeah, like let's go. And I would like hype myself up like I'm gonna get ice cream, and then I would get there and I like couldn't pull the trigger. And so like obviously something was wrong, but I think that when you're around an eating disorder, you realize you can't call it out, because it's only going to create a defense mechanism in that person, right? And so I think my parents recognized that. My dad just tended to like ignore it because he was pissed, and then my mom tried to meet it head on, and she tried to frame everything as a positive. So she's like, well, you really want to gain muscle, why don't we go see a dietitian? And so I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. So like we went to a dietitian, and the dietitian's like, you gotta eat more, and classic dietitian, eat more fats and eat more, eat more carbs. And so then I go read the magazines, and the magazines are like, carbs are bad, fats are bad. And so I'll never forget, actually, like this is almost how bad it got. A dietitian told me like cheese and crackers would be a good snack to get calories in. And so I'm literally on my way to work, and I was working at Best Buy at the time as a cashier, and I'm like eating cheese and crackers in the car. And I get there, and I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I feel like skin hanging over my pants. And I'm like, I now equate that to a fat roll. And then I start going down the rabbit hole of all the things I've read in a magazine that says carbs and fats at the same time are bad. And now I'm literally berating myself in the car. Like, can I swear on here?
Yeah, go for it.
I literally am like, you fat fuck. Like, why did you fucking eat that? And I'm like, I'm doing this in the car before I go in. And so, again, like if I equate that to what I got, I went to a dietitian and I got more clinical knowledge, like eat more calories, eat these things. But like, there wasn't that emotional connection. And I don't want to say I don't want to paint the picture that all dietitians are that, but knowing what I know and having helped some dietitians in the space, they're taught to lean on that clinical knowledge, and it just never served me.
So what was the experience with your coach like? Like, what was like the main difference there between like why you didn't listen to the dietitian versus yes, listened to this coach?
Yeah. So there's 2 things. I look back on it, and there's one distinguishing thing that I think actually put me over the edge, which was, so there's a bodybuilder that would come into the gym every day. I was working the front desk at Gold's Gym, and this bodybuilder would come in, and he was lean. He was getting ready for a show, and so he had muscle. And he was like a bantamweight, so he was only like 145 pounds. So he wasn't like a monster. So it didn't look like, oh, I could never achieve that. So and I remember saying to the trainer, I was like, I want to look like him. And she was like, well, I help him. I do his training and I do his nutrition. And I was like, well, shit, can you do mine? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, all right, great. And I think that like, I guess like that was before the day of like the internet and all that stuff, but like that was there was social proof, right?
Mhm.
And so this person provided me with social proof that what she does works and that what I'm wanting to achieve, she has the vehicle to achieve. And so for whatever reason, I put blind trust in it. And oddly enough, she told me to do something that a lot of people had told me to do, but I think she gave specificity and I think she gave application. And so, everybody had said like, you need to eat more. Like my mom had introduced me to a bodybuilder and he was like, you're fucking tiny, you need to eat more. And I'm like, but eating more is like scary. Right. And so
Mhm.
she gave me like a specific protocol. She's like, eat this number of calories. It was 4,000 calories, by the way. She's like, you need to eat 4,000 calories. And I'm like, seems crazy, but okay. And I'm like, so like what though? Like, and she's like, well, you can have, and then like, I talked to her about the things I like. This is back like when Myoplex shakes were a thing, Body for Life was a thing. And so I was like, I love the Myoplex shake. She's like, okay, so like, let's put 2 of those in. And then she's like, you need some carbs after you work out. And then this supplement. And so like, she gave me some specifics and I felt like somebody cared. And then every day she would come in and she'd be like, did you make your 4,000 calorie meal plan? And I was like, yeah. And so she's like, how are you feeling? And she would ask me these questions, not just about like, am I fat? Am I getting bigger? But she's like, how are you feeling? And then she would like literally train me on the floor in the gym. She would introduce me to this bodybuilder guy. And so like, I had somebody that cared. I had a protocol that felt like it was for me. I had, connection to almost like a community. I was 3 people, but it was the community I wanted, a coach and a bodybuilder. And it was different than everything else I had experienced, right? It wasn't, somebody hadn't just thrown facts at me and been like, good luck. I had somebody that was supporting me the whole way. And thank God, right? I mean, genuinely, like I wonder where I would be or if I would be here today.
Yeah, totally. I think the like aspect of like someone genuinely checking in on you and like caring, it makes a huge, huge difference. Because I mean, I even think of like the relationships I've had with past doctors, and I've had great ones and I've had terrible ones. And the ones that I like the most are like, do you enjoy what you do for work? I'm like, I have never had a doctor ask me that before.
Yeah.
Like just little things like that that make a huge difference. It's like this person actually cares about like all of me, not just like specific lab work or things like that, which I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, as I've grown in the space, and obviously now it's for me, it's come full circle, right? So I've personally coached, over 10,000 people, and my companies have touched hundreds of thousands of people, and you quickly realize that it is that connection, and my nutrition coaching company gained prominence in 2014, and I always tell everyone, I'm like, I didn't sell nutrition coaching, I sold connection, and I remember like people would call me and they'd be like, so like, why does it work so much better? And I'm like, I'm like, my macros or my nutrition is no different. Like it's all backed by science. But I'm like, I think I just give people more confidence in the sense of like, yo, like if you're out to dinner, take a picture of the menu, text it to me and I'll help you make the right choice. And, if you're feeling down, send me a text. Like we'll get on the phone, every 2 weeks and like, we'll talk about it. And like, that didn't exist in the space in 2014. And I think that it was that, I think obviously I own the Nutritional Coaching Institute. And so, I wrote a certification 12 years after the most prominent certification had been published. And everyone's like, how do you compete with facts? And I remember I asked myself the same question, like, how do I rewrite truth? Because truth is truth, right? It's like, we don't rewrite truth. We just add to it. And we understand that truth is step 1 and facts are step 1. But the application and the connection of those facts is what really drives home the result. And that had not yet been taught in the industry. And that's, what allowed us to do those things. And so, I'm eternally grateful for everybody and every journey in my life that has taken the time to like walk a journey with me, to participate with me in a journey, to be willing enough to listen to me complain in the journey. But I think that's what does it. Like that's the magic. I don't, I say the example I give coaches all the time is like, if we took overweight people and we put them in McDonald's and we said, what has less calories, a salad or a Big Mac, everybody could say the salad. And yet when given the decision as to what they're going to eat, 60% of people are going to choose the Big Mac. And so it's like, well, clearly we don't have a knowledge issue, right? We have an application issue. Why are you choosing the Big Mac? And let's uncover that. And that's when the game changes, man. Like, and that's what I love about coaches. Like, that's why coaching is here. It's never going anywhere, by the way. Coaching is never going anywhere. The pandemic proved it. Like, the pandemic proved that humans crave connection. And so like we removed physical connection and like we just facilitated digital connection. And now digital connection is here to stay. And now people also want physical connection. And it's like, it's this beautiful song and dance that just continues to prove like people, humans, are connection-based creatures. Like, we're not meant to live in isolation at all. In fact, when you think about it, what happens when somebody misbehaves, right? Or commits crime in the world? They get sent to isolation, right? That is the single biggest punishment you can have on this planet. We are connection-based creatures. And so we need to continue to facilitate that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like creating an aspect of community is always like huge, I think. Just like being with people who are going through the same thing as you. And I think sometimes that can be like a downfall too with like certain like services or just going to see your doctor or whatever. It's a very short amount of time. You don't get to build that connection with them. You don't surround yourself with other people that are going through the same thing as you. So I find having that connection and that group of people, like, I think that's why like the Nutrition Coaching Institute and like the business side of things is so great, because you're in it with other people with the same struggles and you can bounce ideas off each other. And I think that's no different when it comes to trying to improve your health and fitness.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to remember too, humans that are ready to make change, just that acknowledgement, it's a very vulnerable proposition. You know, it's not always the extremes of an eating disorder, but I've been personally a part of it at the most extreme, which is the eating disorder. And I remember like being willing to ask for help, being willing to engage in the help and to be, you know, for lack of a better word, entirely submissive and admitting of not knowing where my future is going. It's hard. And it takes a very vulnerable individual to step into that. And I think that science doesn't have emotional quotient. Like, science and facts do not have the ability to meet an individual where they are. And I think it's humans that, you know, can pair IQ with EQ and can meet the individual where they are. You know, some of them are going to need a little more love on the front end. Some of them are going to need a little bit more patience on the front end. And I think that that's only something, and I don't even think AI can ruin this. And, you know, Tom Bilyeu tried to tell us it will, but, and, you know, maybe he's right. You know, maybe EQ is a series of learned behaviors, but I still would dispute it. But, you know, I just think that right now, human connection solves 99.9% of problems in the world. Like, when we look at, you know, again, like November 2, 2023, it was like when we're recording, and it, you know, we look at like the world and like the war and, you know, not to say that a single piece of communication will change everything, but I'd be willing to bet you communication at the forefront as a whole is largely what will be the catalyst of solving the problems that exist. And it's communication without bias. It's communication with, you know, the intent of understanding and listening. And I think that's what a really good coach does, right? A coach doesn't lean on, well, I'm smarter than you and I know all the facts. It's like a really good coach leans on the ability to listen, to connect, and to communicate effectively.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, so we've talked a lot about like what's like good for a coach, like characteristics and stuff. But you mentioned like a client being like vulnerable and admitting they need help or like accepting that. What would be some like other like qualities that would like dictate whether you're like quote unquote like a good client, or like using that verbiage, but like what kind of things can you start to develop to really become someone that's going to be like a great client, see results and like see this change? Because I think like mindset and stuff like that plays a gargantuous role in this. So what would you say are like the qualities that people should look at developing so that they can become like a quote unquote good client?
Yeah. So it's funny because I think at times in my life I've been a great client. I think at times in my life I've been a terrible client, but I always engage in coaching. So I love the question. You know, I think that good clients are ready to listen. And I think great clients can can completely remove judgment of themselves. And so I think that what happens in most coaching relationships is that the client creates more expectation than the coach does. And I don't just mean expectation of the coach. I also think that I mean expectation of themselves. And so, we always joke. I think that the groups of coaches always understand. Like there's clients out there, and if you're listening to this, I hope you're not that client. But there's clients out there that like they spend money, they create an investment, and they think that the investment warrants the result. And I think that all clients need to be reminded, investment is just the opportunity cost. It's like that now gives you access to the information that collectively with your coach you have to implement. And so there is still work to be done on the back of the investment. And a lot of coaches or a lot of clients seem to forget that. So that's misplaced expectations of the coach. But then I also think that clients mismanage expectations of themselves in the sense that they think that this journey is going to need to be perfect. And I would completely disagree with that, like with everything in me. I'm 39 years old. I've achieved a decent amount in my life, and not an ounce of it has been perfect. Not one thing. I started varsity soccer only after getting cut from my travel team. I made it as a professional golfer only after injuring myself and developing an eating disorder. I built an 8-figure business only after going broke and being overdrawn on my bank account. None of these things come perfectly to fruition ever. And I think that clients expect it to be this linear journey upwards of perfection. And it never is. Not a single coach has every solution. Not a single coach. And by the way, this is where coaches also have to be better, but not a single coach can guarantee anything is going to happen tomorrow, right? Like, I think at the end of the day, coaching and the process in general is a coach is giving the best educated guess with the information available, and collectively the coach and client read the feedback and make educated decisions moving forward. Like that is the coaching process summed up very quickly. But I think that you have to be ready to change, because clearly what got you here is not going to get you where you're going. And I can say that from a successful point of view and a failure point of view. But you're expecting to continue your eating habits that produced you being overweight, and expecting it to now produce you being, where you want to be weight wise, not really a great outlook. And I think everybody knows that. So, I think it's being self-aware, and I think it's removing expectations.
Yeah. I always get that where like, I'll be like talking to someone in DMs and they're like, oh, but I also had like a cookie yesterday. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, did you enjoy it? Was it awesome? What kind was it? And they're like, that was not the response.
That's my first question.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're like always shocked by it, which I always think is like wild, because like as if you're going to eat quote unquote perfect every single day. But I also think like people are like, if it's not perfect, then I'm not going to like try it all, or they'll be like super inconsistent with it. Right. Because then they'll almost be like, well, you don't have to be perfect. And I'm like, okay, cool. And they equate that with like consistency. And then people start jumping from like, okay, I'm going to cut carbs to, oh, I'm going to cut fat to, oh, I'm going to try this. And like every 2 to 3 weeks, they're trying something different. And I always equate it back to like when I like was first started getting into like health and fitness and working out, I was trying like different programs. I want to grow this and I want to grow that. And it's like every 2 weeks I'd be like changing something, or my routine would change, or I'd work out 6 days a week versus 2 days a week. And it was super chaotic. And then I remember the first time I stuck to like a 6-week program that was just 3 days a week, my legs and butt grew so much in 6 weeks. And I'm like, it's literally just because I was being consistent. But I think we all, if like we can't be perfect, and then their coach is like, oh, well, you're not expected to be perfect, then they equate that with, oh, I don't have to be consistent, which is like 2 very different things. So how do you kind of explain that to like clients? Because I mean, you've worked with like nutrition clients and fitness clients and like coaches. So like, how do you kind of get them to not focus on being perfect, but yet still be consistent? Because that does matter.
Yeah. So we have a saying at NCI in level 1, and we always say education drives compliance. And so I'm a very big believer coaches can't make decisions for you. We can't think for you, but we can give you the appropriate information and help you learn to think better. And I think that understanding that, progress over perfection, I think that's just learning behavior. And it's a learned outcome, right? And so, even myself today, I mean, I would argue I still struggle with it. And I've coached tens of thousands of people. And so if I'm going to struggle with it, by no means can I expect you to get it perfectly. And, I think you actually said something like really poignant in the sense that like when a client says, I had a cookie, a really good nutritional coach, the first question they're going to ask is what kind, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to completely disarm you. And I think that a lot of times, Tony Robbins actually talks about this, and it's actually just neuro-linguistic programming, right? It's NLP. But I think that if you've ever seen the Netflix documentary, I'm Not Your Guru with Tony Robbins, there's a kid that like literally talks about like wanting to kill himself. And Tony Robbins walks up to him and he goes, is it because of those heinous red shoes that you're wearing? And like completely gets the guy to like laugh, right? Like this guy's got this like scared look on his face, like super serious, like I'm gonna kill myself. And then Tony's like, yeah, dude, because you're wearing the worst shoes in the world. And it's like this guy expects Tony to go into this like line of questioning, and he wants him to engage in the seriousness of suicide and the seriousness of depression. And Tony's like, no, like we're gonna completely frame shift. And I think that as coaches, we have to understand most of our clients, they don't want to live miserably in their own choices. They want to commiserate about their choices. And so a lot of times they'll look for sympathy. They'll look for commiseration about bad choices. And like, that's why I'm like, if people are like, yeah, I had a cookie, I'm like, great, what kind? And then they're like oatmeal raisin. And I'm like, well, dude, you suck. You have to at least get chocolate chip, right? Like, and it's like, why would you ever choose oatmeal in your cookie, like when it's like you're eating for pleasure, like, no, like and it's like, and I'll make a joke about it, and then I'm like, great, like you only had one, I had 6 last night. Sounds amazing. Like, do better next time. And it's like now, like we've disarmed the human and or, the person, and it's like now we can start to work together, and now we can uncover, okay, like why does this behavior show up? Is it truly a sabotage behavior? Is it not a behavior that we just need to accept as part of your life and work around? I had a client that for 9 months, every Friday and Saturday night, she would get like blackout drunk. Like, I mean, the stories on Monday were great. Don't get me wrong. Like I got wild stories about like the parties on Friday and Saturday. But like it was very frustrating as the coach because I was trying to get her results, like, and I pride myself on like, man, if you pay me money, I'm going to get an amazing result. And I was getting nowhere. And so I finally just had this come to Jesus with her. And I'm like, listen, I don't think you're going to change. Like, I don't think you're going to change. So can we just work around this? And can we just like allow you on Friday and Saturday and encourage you to just go get blackout drunk? Like be safe, but like go get blackout drunk. And she's like, I guess. And so like we actually built a protocol, and I mean like we did it by science. Like we added up on average how many calories she consumes via alcohol, via the food she would inevitably eat. And we subtracted that from the weekly number of calories we needed, and we created the deficit across the other 5 days. Sure as shit, right? She stopped drinking as much because it was no longer a behavior that was taboo. And so therefore she didn't feel the need to go excessive. 2, she adhered to the diet perfectly the other 5 days. And like within 3 weeks, we were significantly ahead of anything we had created in 9 months. And I just think it comes down to like, I don't give a fuck what you want to do with your life. Like, as long as it's not destroying your health, which, listen, I don't think anybody should get blackout. And I tried, I promise. But as long as it's not destroying your health, as long as it's not like, killing your lifestyle, like I'm pretty much going to be supportive. And so, but I think good coaches also, I think it requires critical thinking to get to that. And I've always said that the best coaches in the world are the best at deductive reasoning, because really all we do is we're presented with a series of facts and we have to deduce the answer that is most logical relative to the situation presented to us. And so luckily for me growing up, I was great at that side of math. It's, I think coaching is so much different than people think it is. I think I've heard it described as manipulating human behavior, and I think that swings the pendulum too far. I think that's very overblown. I've heard it described as only addressing human behavior, which I think is also overblown. But then I've also heard it described as everything has to be evidence-based, and I'm also not in favor of that. And I think that the answers lie somewhere in between. I think that it's a combination of human connection, evidence-based science, understanding human behavior, and combining the 3 to move towards an outcome that everybody desires. And I think, again, at the forefront of that, the ability to properly communicate is so critical.
Yeah, like I've had in the past, this is probably only a couple months ago actually, where a client was like consistently like just struggling. She would overeat on potato chips. Like she'd be good, and then like would overeat. So I hopped on a call with her and her coach, and I was like, hey, like the potato chips seem to be a problem. What if we have like a mini bag literally 3 days a week? And she's like, was shocked. She was like, I don't know if I can do this. She is crushing it currently because we like took that taboo thing, worked it in regularly, makes it super easy. She's not like feeling she can't have the thing. Sometimes she doesn't even have the bag of chips, but it's like, I think people just get so caught up on this is good, this is bad, these are the rules, you can do this, you can't do that. And it's like, no, it's so individualized, but at the same time, like the client does have to like, you have to be able to talk to the client to get them to tell you more stuff. Cause what's the point in giving a check-in if they're like, I'm good, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm okay. It's like, okay, I can't really get much out of that. So then we have to like kind of harass them and get to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, you asked me so many questions. It's like, yeah, because I need to know everything to be able to help you as best as I can, because everyone thinks it's just like, just my macros, just my nutrition. It's like, there's so many other factors that play into it that are really important to like be aware of. So I always feel like sometimes we're harassing people sometimes, but once they like figure out like the why behind all this stuff, then it's like, then things really take off, I find. But that mindset of like sharing enough and being vulnerable and telling us when they're struggling, because sometimes I feel they're so nervous of being judged or being like, oh, they're going to think I'm like an annoying client or that I'm always complaining or this or that. And I'm like, no, like this is how we move forward. Like complain, tell me the things. What are you struggling with? What do you not like? This is how we move forward. It's not this rigid plan you have to follow, which is like all those fad diets. Like this is individualized 100% to the person, which is what I like about the coaching aspect, because I've worked again with like lots of people as well, had my own coaches and mentors, and you can tell when it's successful is because it's like actually personalized to you and they care about you, which is nice.
It's actually funny because I'm in complete agreement, and that's, I think for a long time on the business side of things, I actually struggled because I understood that like the coaching process and the success of coaching has absolutely nothing to do with the resources I give you, but more about our implementation of the resources. And so I'm like, well, I'm not going to fucking waste my time giving you resources that you don't need. And so then like in this space where everyone's like, well, I'll give you this resource, it was almost like my value or the perceived value was like lower because I wasn't willing to go in and build out all these like beautiful resources and modules and all that shit. But I was like, yeah, but like give me like 4 weeks with you, an hour on the phone, and like I promise you I'll change your life. And like it was, people didn't quite comprehend that. So yeah, like I'm in massive agreement. I think that, I think just creating a safe space for people is really important. And I think that that's, I think the best coaches are the ones that have been coached, quite honestly. I'll openly say any coach that doesn't personally invest in coaching themselves is a fraud. Like I've not met a single successful coach in this world that does not have another coach in some area of their lives. Now, I'm not saying that a successful nutrition coach has to have a nutrition coach. I think at some point you actually learn to manage your own shit better than most people will, right? But I guarantee you that person has a life coach or a business coach or a spirituality coach or whatever. And because we understand and we appreciate the art and the craft, and it's not about success. It's not about monetary success. It's not about personal success. It's about like, we understand this makes us better as humans. And I think that every coach I know has at least one present in their life. I mean, fuck, I've got like 4 or 5 at any given time, right?
Same.
I tell everyone, like, I'm super fucked up. So like, man, I need a lot of help. But but I love it, and I think that when you really know the power of it, when you really delivered the power of it, I think that you go seeking the power that you also have. And I think that, I guess I've never really thought of it this way too, but I think that a lot of clients, like a lot of our best clients likely have great friendships as well. Because I think being a really good client is very akin to being a really good friend. I think it's showing up, being vulnerable, being truthful, uncovering what's truly, not working and problem solving. And I think that, relationships and friendships are very much the same. So it's I've really never put that like two and two together like that. But I think that it's probably, if I had to go back and look at some of my most successful clients, they were probably very good at that part of their life as well.
Yeah, like I kind of chuckled when you were talking about like making the modules and having all these resources, because like we make so many resources and I call people out all the time like, did you even open it? Did you even try like two of the things out of there? Did you follow any of the advice? And I think it's hilarious because like you guys have so much stuff in NCI and like the business side of stuff like modules. I think I've watched one video. I'm going to be honest.
And you're one of our most successful clients ever. Like, and but that's the thing, because I also know that, candidly, you and I can get on a 15-minute call and I can say, here's the problem, here's the solution, have at it, and you'll go do it. And like,
yeah,
I mean, but again, like that goes back to the whole dynamic of like perception, and it kind of speaks to the evolution of the industry. But I'll caveat that and I'll say I don't love the evolution of the industry. And so it speaks to the current state, and I don't love the current state. And it's interesting we're having this conversation, because I also think finding a coach is easier than ever. Finding a good coach is harder than ever. And I think that, as somebody who has personally, our companies have certified over 7,000 coaches. I've had to take a long, hard look in the mirror in the last, probably 18 months and say, how are we contributing to impacting the world? Because that was always the mission, right? Like we always say, impact over everything, billion person mission. And I had to ask myself, how are we impacting the world, like the end consumer? Our vehicle is you guys, the coaches, like giving you the knowledge, giving you the ability to build a business. And I think it's changed. Like, I think that the role has changed. And I think in, equipping the right people with the right things is different today. I think that it will continue to evolve. I think everything is slightly cyclical in our world. But I think that it's very exciting times, because I think that a lot of times at inflection points, you start to see the cream rise, right? You see the people that are good really excel, and the people that are not so good, they kind of weed themselves out. And so, my only hope is that no one out there that's ever tried a coaching program that was less than perfect doesn't think that the coaching industry is like that. I think that there's a lot of people that allow themselves to get burned twice. I would love to say all coaches are amazing, but it's just not the truth. They're not. There's some coaches that are absolutely in it purely for the financial gain. There's some coaches that, I'll openly admit, like we've had business people that we've coached their business, people that do $1 million annually. And they came to us and they said, well, hey, how do I get results from my clients? And I was like, wait a minute. So like, we taught you how to make $100,000 a month. And now you're coming to me and you're asking me like how you fulfill on that. And I'm like, that's just unethical. And so I had to actually drop them as a client, like in that moment. And because ethics is always going to be number one. And so it's, I hope that the people listening don't allow themselves to get burned more than once. Like somebody, I don't think any coach goes out there maliciously, right? I don't think there's a human being that's like, I'm going to take your money and ha, 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 I fooled you. I don't think that. I think some coaches get in over their heads, and I think some people just, they get overwhelmed, and it's poor service delivery. And so, but if you're a client, don't let that like stop you from getting what's out there. There's amazing people like you. Like there's so many great coaches in the world that, dig a little deeper, find the coach, because again, like I'm living proof. The coach can change everything, man. Like I was 118 pounds, and I promise you, it was near death. And 20 years later, I'm fortunate that I'm not 118 pounds. I don't, I can never predict that I'm not near death, but I'm much happier and much healthier, and we've helped a few people along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to know that like if you had a bad experience, doesn't mean all of them are going to be that way. Like just like there's good doctors and not so good doctors, or people you connect with and don't connect with. Like there are people whose methods are the same, and it's just who you connect with more, whose messaging you like resonate with, that kind of stuff. So I think it's really important to like not let one bad experience prevent you from like going out there and trying to achieve your goals. Because I mean, I've gone through coach after coach after coach as well, where it's like, hey, it served their purpose. I learned this kind of stuff. Now I need someone who's more specialized in XYZ or whatever that is. Because like for most people who come and see us, we're not their first attempt by any means. And like, I think you're probably the same with like different people who've had different business mentors and stuff, right? Like you keep having to, as you learn and grow, you do outgrow certain coaches and stuff. And that's normal. And I think there's no shame in being like, okay, this didn't work or this person wasn't for me. Who else is out there? Like, that's okay. It's almost like dating.
I would almost argue the best coaches are slightly more. It's funny because I've never once in my career as a coach made the whole point to be like the most visible. I've always made it about my clients first. And so I think that, by the time somebody finds us, they're like, yeah, well, I tried the other ones because, they had more ads or they had more this. And I'm like, oh, like, well, they're busy spending their time on ads. I'm busy spending my time helping my clients. And so, and so I don't always think that the best services are there. I'm very much in the belief that everything we need in this world is somewhere. It's just hidden. Like there's probably someone in the world that has a cure for cancer. We just don't know it yet. There's probably, if you're listening to this and you're a consumer, there's probably a coach out there. You just haven't found them yet. If you're looking for a job that you love, you just haven't found it yet. And it's there and it's hidden. And so you have kind of two choices, right? You can just accept what you found as all that's in the world, or you can keep digging. And I think that, that's always what's excited me about helping coaches, is helping the less known person that is amazing become visible to the people that need them. And I always tell coaches, you have an ethical responsibility to find a way to create visibility so that your clients can find you. Because I don't know how many clients your business services every year, but I can promise you, if the hundreds of people that you guys service didn't find you every year, their lives would not be where they are. And it's sad to think about that. It's sad to think about if they found some, coaching service that only cared about the money, like where they would be and what they would be saying about coaching. I know you guys have amazing referrals and testimonials, and it's like people rave about you guys because you guys focus on that. And it's, I've been to trainers myself. I've been to, live events. I've done all these things. And, heck, like let's talk food, right? Like if I told you like my favorite pizza place in the world, you'd be like, what the fuck is that? Right. But it's like this little
literally
place in New York. And it's like, I just kept digging until I found the place in New York. Right. So like we all have like these favorite things, but everybody probably doesn't know what they are. And I mean, if that's not more indicative of what we need to be doing when searching for the right person to help us through our journey of change, then I don't know what is.
Yeah. And honestly, I think people like equate with like followers on Instagram to like success or things like that, which is like insane.
That's a deep, dark rabbit hole that we will not go down because you don't want to get me started. All we have to do is remind everybody that you can buy followers on Instagram. And if you can buy followers, like that should tell you everything. So
exactly. So one last question I wanted to ask you was, with clients, like what would be the biggest indicator for success for them? Like what is the thing that if they can do and hammer down is going to like be like, you are going to reach success? Timeline, irrelevant, but like if you are able to do this one thing, like you are going to get there.
Yeah, I think it's compliance, right? As simple as that sounds. And so, but then I think that there's levels and layers to that. I think that I don't know a coach out there that can create success for a client that doesn't follow a program. I think that's a no-brainer and it should sound reasonably obvious. That being said, I also don't know a client in the world that should follow a program that they absolutely hate. And so I think that, and nor do I know one that will follow a program they hate forever. And so I think that it's like, if we're always distilling it down to the same core values of connection and communication, right? Because if you're the client and you don't tell your coach that you hate this and it's producing results, the coach is only left to their own devices, which is, well, this program works and the person's not complaining, right? So communication's huge. Connection's big there. Conversely, if you're the coach and the client is telling you that like they only will do these things, like you need to be very honest around what it takes to be successful, and you need to look and seek compromise. So I don't think there's any like one thing other than facilitating compliance. I, as a coach, will take 60% of efficacy with 100% compliance. So I will build you a program that I know to be only 60% effective if you'll comply 100%. Because one of two things is going to happen. One, we're just slowing down progress, which is fine. I'm as patient as can be. Or two, I'm going to build you a lot of momentum and you're going to step up to 65%, 70%, 75%. And you're going to be willing to make more concessions in your life to get there faster. And I'm okay with either way, right? Whereas if I give you a program that's 100% effective and you can only be 40% compliant, like, I'm not down with that, because now you feel like a failure. Now I'm only re-ingraining what the industry has already told you, that it's, this highly restrictive piece. And so, yeah, I mean, I genuinely think that it requires those things. And I'm sorry, you can't do that through some fucking app. You can't do that through AI. You can't do that through a textbook. It requires coaching.
I love that. Compliance, honestly, is like, yeah, the be all end all. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make a drink, right? Like that's the whole thing. So it's, how can we get this horse to drink water?
And I don't know when this is going to be released, but I think compliance also needs to be viewed through a specific lens, right? So we're doing this right before United States Thanksgiving, and then obviously holidays like Christmas, Hanukkah, like New Year's, all those things, right? And so I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm not willing to be compliant right now. And I think that people need to reframe what compliance is, because I don't think that any good coach in their right mind would expect you to be restrictive right now. And so if your expectation as a client is that the only level of compliance is restriction, then you need to drop what you believe to be true and educate yourself and have a conversation with the coach at the very least. Because I think that it's there's so many layers of that specific individual, of that specific circumstance. But I just think that like clients in general have to reframe what they think compliance is too. And so it's just dropping those preconceived notions. And again, being willing to learn, being open, being ready to communicate, being ready to connect.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think people assume compliance means like being super strict and having these like crazy schedules. And it's like, nah, it's like, okay, we're just making sure you're having breakfast every day. Like, this is what we're focusing on for the next, like, people just think it's got to be so extreme. And when it's not, they're like confused. But I mean, that's how you make lasting change. It's doable. It's realistic. If it's not realistic, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. The clients say, I never thought it could be this easy. Well, I mean, maybe that's why you weren't successful, because you never knew it could actually be easy. And you tried to force diets to be difficult, and nobody sticks with difficult shit forever.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Jason. I super appreciate it. And I'll tag all your socials and stuff in the notes so people can find you.
Amazing. Well, I will also thank you as well. Like I get asked, and I get the opportunity to be on lots of podcasts and lots of speaking engagements. And I always try to do my best to thank the person that brings me on, because honestly, like, you're doing the work that the world needs. You're the one that's out there. Your company is changing lives. You are servicing so many people each and every year. And you're giving all of the listeners an opportunity. You're giving your time to put this out into the world where they can improve their lives. And so I'm sure everybody listening now would join me, but honestly, the thanks is to you. You're the one putting this together, and we all owe you a massive amount of gratitude. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.